Boop. Hey y'all, I am VictorÜ. I help provide insight to empower, and today I wanted to talk about boundaries. This is something that's taken me a long time to figure out just because I grew up in a household, in an environment that was very enmeshed. There were not a lot of boundaries and there wasn't a whole lot of communication, especially not explicit communication. Something that I had to learn the hard way. If you're anything like me, you know that those things that you learned the hard way end up being what you learn best, and it ends up being the value that you bring to the world, to those around you, and especially to yourself. So today we're going to cover healthy separation, saying no to self and others, and showing no. And right here I have written, saying no to one thing is saying yes to something else. So in saying no to one thing, we're going to be saying yes to another, and that's something that I'd like to elaborate on. For number one, healthy separation. And this can look very different depending on where you go and who you are as a person, your likes, your interests, and for me especially, like what I want to escape from or distract myself from. So place to place is how I like to frame this. Today's example, kind of what sparked this video or this message, this download, whatever you want to call it. I've gotten into the habit of being very intentional about my time. Intentionality is one of my biggest values, and I'll cover my values and how I came to them in another video. But for today, I go to school, I wake up, go to school, come home, and that's a prompt for me. Yeah, so the old way, the unconscious way, the escapist, unengaged way of going about life through the programming, through the ego, just very disengaged from life, was to seek pleasure. So if I ever came home, if I was under the old way and I come home from school, well then I'm immediately going to the TV, I used to smoke a lot of weed or drink, just escape from being engaged fully with a moment. So today, for me, healthy separation from place to place looks like, just as an example, I come home from school and I take off my shoes and I take, depending on how I feel with myself, within my body especially, I might take 5 minutes, I might take an hour to just be with myself. I'll set a timer on my phone, 5 minutes to an hour, depending on how I'm feeling, to gauging myself. And I'll just sit there, or I'll just lay there and do nothing. I allow myself, I give myself permission to do fucking nothing. Nothing. And that helps me create a boundary between school, or in the future when I graduate school, work, my work life, and I come home to my home life. If I'm like going out to some place, I might, because I've dealt with social anxieties, especially after my time in the military, especially coming back to Chicago. I spent 6 months in Arizona, and then coming back to Chicago. Every single time I come back to Chicago, there's this anxiety in the air. I feel it every single time I come home. So that invites me, that feeling is my prompt to pay attention to how things make me feel and adjust, adapt from there. Do what I need to do for myself, for my mental health. And in taking care of my mental health, I'm taking care of my physical health. So if I'm going out, like I was saying, I might do a prompt. I might get myself in the mood, let's say, for being sociable. Now nowadays I'm sober. I'm sobriety. I'm sober. So there's usually the collective identity or the collective expectations. And this is kind of what I was alluding to when I was saying that I grew up in a very enmeshed, boundaryless household, is that I would take on the things that my family was thinking, doing, saying as my own. It's kind of what we do as kids, but for me, there just wasn't a boundary. Now, this I can go deeper into this and like how my dad grew up in that way, where like, when he was a kid, everybody slept in one room because it was a very small house. They didn't have a lot of money, and that kind of informed his persona. His whole vibe is one of being like very family oriented in a way. I mean, definitely a value, but in a way that could use some reworking, which feels like a big purpose for me in my life. But having a healthy separation helps me have a core identity. I'm not being a conduit for other people's shit, right? This is what I experienced in my household, is that everybody had their shit, and I took that on unknowingly, empathically, and made it my own. Part of that was to survive, but part of that was also just not knowing any better. And it was also contrary to self. It was in a way not neglecting, but self-abandoning. It was very self-abandoning for me to have this core self within me and then go against that because I was used to being in that survivalistic mindset of I need to adapt to my surroundings and be kind of like a chameleon, changing my vibe, my personality to match my surroundings so that I could pass by a little more unnoticed, or a little, in my mind, a little safer, a little more secure. So when practicing having a boundary from place to place, that's something that's going to leak over into every other part of my life. It's because it's something I'm doing with the intention of that, and it's just something that happens as a byproduct of practicing healthy boundaries. For number 2, saying no to self and others. So what usually in my line of work with spiritual healing and helping people connect to themselves, there's a lot of, there needs to be a lot of work with boundaries, just with the clients I've worked with and in the circles I roll in. And in saying no, there's a lot of power in that. And if you've felt disempowered in life, but especially in certain areas of your life, saying no to others can feel very empowering, but it can feel like a power trip. So keeping in mind that it's not just saying no to others, this newfound superpower that you like feel, that I felt like I had for sure, and I've seen in others, but keep in mind that that goes both ways. There's the internal and the external, saying no to self and saying no to others. And taking, like for me, in taking on other people's stuff, I thought their shit was my own. So in a lot of ways, it was like saying, like for me, I saw my dad drinking, so I thought, everybody that he was hanging out with was drinking, and he fell heavily into alcoholism, and he's sober now, but that was still a lot of shit to go through and to take on, especially going through the military. There's a lot of shit that I wanted to block out, and alcohol worked wonders for self-harm. But in saying no to myself, because I'd gotten used to medicating, escaping really, because I had gotten used to that, it had become habit. And now there's this part of me that's relying on this external thing, alcohol, or, I mean, weed was way bigger for me than alcohol. But in having that part of me that wanted that was used to that, like a pacifier, is how I came to think about it, framing it. It was very deeply uncomfortable to say no to that part of myself, that aspect of myself that sought comfort and self-soothing, especially for me. Like, I didn't grow up being soothed by my parents, which a lot of people would think of like, toughens you up, toughen up, buttercup. Parents aren't always going to be there. But when you have healthy parents who practice healthy ways, effective ways of soothing their children, the positive, the desirable, the effective outcome there is that we learn to self-soothe as adults in healthy and effective ways. Not feeling my shit, not feeling my emotions, not processing them, and instead drinking and smoking and escaping in all sorts of, in video games. Video games were huge for me, and cigarettes were a lot. Like, I smoked a lot. I smoked for like 11 years. But I quit since then because I figured out, okay, I'm using this. I learned this is what cool, I mean, there's so much there with alcohol. This is what a social lubricant, right? That's what I was talking about with social expectation. I'm going out to socialize. It's kind of expected that we're going to drink. If we hang out with people who smoke weed, it's expected that, and especially if we've smoked in the past and all of a sudden we're setting boundaries, saying no and showing no, right? Saying no to people and then following that up with the action, right? Not going out and being like, okay, I'm not going to smoke, you guys. And then, 5 minutes later, I'm like, okay, here we go. And then smoking or drinking. But saying no and then following that up by showing, not just saying, not just telling. Saying no to those aspects of ourselves. I can touch on that briefly, and especially I'll save this for another video. I'll write it down right now. It was the social lubricants, the kind of collective thought or the collective karma, expectation, really same thing. Next video. And by collective expectations, what I mean is like the things people are kind of like the thought forms or archetypes of expectation. So these tend to express themselves in sayings, right? Alcohol is a social lubricant that builds, that sets an expectation, especially one of, it's okay to do this. So, but alcohol, bud. We can get into wording too. I mean, like bud, that's a positive connotation. It's like bud. But if I said weed, I mean, think of weed. Like that's usually an undesirable part of a landscape. And we're just saying this in a kind of multi-dimensional way, not just a person's front yard, but also the mental, emotional landscape that we're collectively traversing, right? Collective. And then cigarettes and alcohol. I'll put these in the same category. Cigs, alcohol. For me, they're kind of parallel. They're very parallel, and they usually go hand in hand. And I'll come back. I'm really excited for this now. But setting boundaries with these things, you're going to traverse through I traversed through a whole lot of discomfort because there's expectation there's things that I'm used to, and now I'm kind of deriving, almost leeching security and certainty, expectations, what we expect, what we wait on, what we're kind of holding our breath for, unconsciously, mindlessly. There's something that we're expecting, and when that doesn't happen, it's almost like you're walking down the steps and you expect there to be another step, and there isn't, so you just kind of like, I don't know, shock yourself present, I guess. But it's, especially depending on how addictive it is and how much we rely or depend on it, it can be terribly uncomfortable. In building a boundary with, let's say, these vices and with other, like masturbation or porn, the reward that we got from it ends up being tantamount to the discomfort that we're going to have to then traverse to get out of it. When I first started giving up, weed was a big one. I would set a time. I got advice from my video on Instagram, I think, to set a timer for 10 minutes. Right, set a timer for 10 minutes. This is what I would do. Set a timer for 10 minutes and just sit with whatever is there. Breathe. Because I'm just sitting there, so I might as well pay attention to something. I'm not watching a video, I'm not on my phone, I'm not on my laptop. I'm just sitting there and being with that desire to drink or smoke or, I had alcohol in there once. What was the other thing? There's another thing that was besides alcohol. Alcohol, cigs, pleasure, I guess. Sure. It's like pleasure. Oh, pleasure. So I set a timer and just sit with the discomfort. And a big part of this, of setting boundaries and how discomforting, how uncomfortable that is, and how much giving in to the same old dynamics, reworking contracts, it's easier. It's the path of least resistance. And resistance, I mean, fucking holy hell. Huge. This is, I would say, my bread and butter. This is where the source of discomfort and pain, really, whenever I say pain or whenever I say discomfort, I just mean pain. This is how I used to think about it, or the shorthand of something undesirable, something that is not pleasure, is uncomfortable. And I'm kind of laughing with myself because inside I'm like, okay, the normal person, the everyday person who's just maybe starting to awaken or who's been awakening and hasn't heard of this framework yet, definitely refers to what I call discomfort as pain, like hard stop pain. For me, pain is discomfort, and discomfort is resistance to something that is there that I wasn't aware of before. The cat's just pawing out the water. Yeah, pain equals discomfort. I'll just write it down. Pain equals discomfort equals resistance. So when I burn myself, if I like touch a hot pan or something, before, under the old mindset or framework, something undesirable just happened. and I wish that it hadn't happened, and take this as like, take it and run with it into like all sorts of different things, cross apply it into so many different parts of your life. Something happened that I didn't want to happen, that you didn't want to happen, that we didn't want to happen, and now there's resistance to it. We didn't want it to happen, that's the resistance. That's like the small thing that ends up tripping us up. And it causes discomfort, and we don't like that, so then we end up resisting it. We get into this loop of resistance and discomfort. There is discomfort which sparks resistance, and that is what we label as pain. So if we give up the resistance, the discomfort may be there, but now in the moment there's not just pain, there's also everything else. So if I burn myself, for example, or if somebody cheated on me, or if I'm going through a breakup, if I'm like, inner child me is being neglected by his parents or being abused by his parents, then there is pain there. There is resistance there. But if I come back to my breath, come back to my posture, come back to the moment, not just the pain, well then my attention went from 100% pain, focus on the pain, to, okay, now I'm with the moment, now I'm breathing, now I'm processing the pain, and that 100% pain went down to 30%. And now there's discomfort, there's pain, but now that I'm also, for example, like real shit right now, because I started breathing and became more engaged with the moment, now the colors seem a little brighter. It's almost like, it honestly almost feels like when I first started smoking weed, or when I take a break, or when I would take a break and smoke weed again, and it would get me high and like just very present and engaged, and so everything seemed brighter and more vibrant. Breathing is a natural high, it provides a natural high. If you think of cigarettes, nicotine, the loss of like the body, the nicotine leaving the body is what creates the craving for more nicotine. So it keeps us in a loop. And we think cigarettes make us feel better, but really what's going on is that we're breathing. I mean, think of like if you've ever smoked, or if you smoke weed, or we're using something external to give us permission to breathe, to take a moment for ourselves, to give ourselves a break. And so if you think of like, I mean, for me, for sure, and for people that I've like friends who I see still smoking cigarettes and weed, there's this tension, there's this like resistance, right? There's such resistance to the moment, to being just present and engaged with the moment, because the permission to be engaged with the moment is being guarded. There's like a gatekeeper to ease, to engagement with the present. I'm just gonna check something really quick. Still good. There's like a gatekeeper. There's a self-imposed gatekeeper. We're telling ourselves, I cannot relax or be at ease until I have a drink, until I have a fucking hit, until I have a cigarette, until I give myself pleasure. And so in bypassing these things and letting these things go and giving ourselves a break from these gatekeepers, we're now giving ourselves our own power back. And this also ties back into reworking contracts. So a contract just means an agreement, an expectation that I have with someone else. And My boy Jack here is an awesome example. He's in kind of. You want to say hi? No. Ah, Jack. So when I come home, and this would happen with my dog especially, and why she became so codependent, and something to look out for if if you're in a or have been in a codependent relationship, is something to look out for, right? If I come home, and this is something I noticed today, I'm still working through it, and why I said this sparked the video for boundaries and healthy separation. If I come home and let's say turn on the TV at 4 p.m. every single day, when I don't do that, my body reacts like something's wrong. My nervous system is like, hey, something's off pattern here. Now, if I come home and pet my cat, or what used to be my dog, every single day, every time I come through the door, now that dog has now that my cat has an expectation of like, every time I come home, my person is going to essentially spark a huge release of dopamine within me. Therefore, whenever they come home, I'm on them. On them. My dog she's still alive, just to put you at ease. But she would just like jump on me, and I had to like say no and really come to the realization that when I come home, I need to act like everything's normal, put my things down, take that 5-minute break, that hour break that I give myself, and then make time for others. Make time for my partner, make time for my cat, make time for my family, whoever. First, I need to empty my cup, and from there, I can fill it with with space for other people, with other people's presence. Once I've emptied it out, that I can be mindful of like what all is there, and I'm not giving beyond capacity. So in reworking these contracts, there might be some resistance, there's definitely gonna be some discomfort, but it starts with ourselves. And it's just, Jack and how I treat others. This is where a lot of anxiety, a lot of sensation might be induced or sparked, is because we're kind of instead of going through the path of least resistance, we're now blazing a new trail. And if you've ever walked through, tall grass or just an unwalked path, it's more difficult than walking through an open space or on a road or on a beaten path. And that's because not just how the other person is reacting to us, but how we might anticipate or get anxious about how they might react. And this is where the mantra comes in. I'm going to put the mantra. Just something to take away, like an affirmation or something a phrase, a code that you can write or put in your mind. I am willing to deal with the results, the outcome, the ramifications of being my full self. I'm willing to deal with the ramifications of being my full self. Let this be your sword and shield when walking into an interaction where you're going to rework the expected dynamic between you and somebody else. If it's you and, I mean, anybody else, think of anybody else in your life, your parents, your siblings, your partner, your friends, your social group, and you're noticing like, I just don't vibe with these people right now or anymore. There's going to be, like I said, an induction, a traversing across discomfort of like, maybe to put words to the feeling of, if I don't have these people, then I have nobody, is the fear. That's the fear talking. If I don't have these people, then who do I have? Who's supporting me? Who's in my corner? Who am I providing value to? So in reworking these contracts, these just like agreements of like, this is the role I'm playing, this is the role you're playing, and we're gonna play these roles even if, you know, the devil you know, even if it's not healthy or not the healthiest it can be. And in saying, coming into it with, I'm willing to deal with the ramifications of being my full self, well then, now we're grounded in our being. Not in our persona, but in our being. And, I mean, if you're on Instagram, you might have heard this of like, you may lose people in finding yourself and being yourself, but in facing that fear, let's say, not even in losing people, but in facing the fear of losing people, you're gonna find out who's really got your back. And I think I've found that pretty much everybody stayed. There have been very few people who I've lost along the way. Maybe we just don't talk as much anymore, but there's a mutual respect there. And that's better, because now I'm not self-abandoning by keeping those agreements, those dynamics and relationships alive by doing things that aren't healthy for me anymore. And now I get to be more myself, not be behind like a mask of who I think this person expects me to be. I'll elaborate more on this in another video. And then 3, right here I have showing no and consumption. So I feel like just to recap on that, it's not just a matter of like saying no and like putting it out to the universe or like saying an affirmation, but showing no, and showing no to self, and then showing no to others. Because if I say I'm sober or I'm breaking up with my girlfriend, holy shit, how many times did I say that? If I'm saying that, but then, you know, I'm getting back with my ex, or I'm, you know, falling off the wagon, or smoking again, or going back to porn or something, or going back to smoking cigarettes, well then it's not even about showing others that I don't have integrity to my word. It's that I'm showing that to myself. When I can show that to myself, well then it's a lot easier to show up that way with others. It's easier to show up that way with others. So I want to be mindful of what I'm consuming, especially if I'm giving up alcohol, let's say, but I'm still consuming not even alcohol, but like, I don't know, Instagram ads or content, or on Facebook, if, you know, my friends and relatives are, you know, showing pictures of themselves drinking and getting wasted and whatever, and especially if I'm reacting to that, like putting positive reacts on Facebook to that, or liking it on Instagram, or, you know, whatever, or on Snapchat, I'm like, woo, party up. If I'm consuming that content, to me, that's sending a message. And then if I positively reinforce their behavior, I'm putting it in my own mind that that's desirable behavior. And this is kind of like what I was getting to, what I was alluding to with collective expectations and how I gave up cigarettes. Alan Carr's The Easy Way to Stop Smoking was in becoming aware of, it's a book, check it out, of what's in the collective that positively reinforces something. Kind of like how I said, alcohol has that association with being, liquid courage, or a social lubricant, or seeing movies where everybody's unwinding with a beer, or being social with alcohol, or getting really fucked up and strengthening their bonds in that way. Well, and that's putting it in my own mind. If I'm not at least being mindful that, like, okay, this is what they do, it's not something that I fuck with anymore. Then it's going to be more, it's going to have a stronger presence in my mind and create a stronger magnetism or attraction to it. It's going to make it more okay. Yeah. I'm in HVAC school right now, and the school itself is like 97% dudes. I don't mean guys, I don't mean men, I mean dudes. And most of them drink or smoke weed or smoke cigarettes. And I've been noticing how, I don't know, but like how much of that works its way into my own mind, into my, my cup, how I said earlier. And it's something that I have to, whenever I see it, whenever I feel that those urges that have kind of gone to sleep, to smoke or to drink or to whatever, this helps me out a lot. I'm willing to deal with the ramifications of being my full self. I'm willing to be the lone wolf. I'm willing to go against the grain or go against the crowd if it means I'm showing up in a way that is healthy to and for me. Because when I do things that are healthy to and for me, then that just is who I am. And so that's who I get to show up as with my friends and family. I get to be that guy. And that ends up being a lot more desirable than being someone who I don't respect. Which is the last thing, choosing my discomfort, choosing my suffering. I'm always choosing my suffering, but I can do so mindfully. I'm always choosing my suffering. I had this one friend in class today show up. We got out, class let out at 2:30 today. He showed up at like 1:50 in the afternoon, reeking of alcohol. And this guy's like on the verge of failing the class, even though he's very gifted in what we do. He's choosing his suffering, right? And I have nothing but compassion, not so much empathy, because I'm not taking on his energy and like feeling sorry for him or whatever. I'm having like compassion is empathy plus boundaries. Just keep that in mind. Empathy plus boundaries. I used to be that guy. I used to not even seek thrill, but get my thrills from being on the verge of failing, riding that wave. And that was a time. But I was choosing my suffering. I was choosing my discomfort in that. And it was maybe fun for me, but very stressful to those around me. And I always want to have love for myself, but I also want to have a healthy balance of keeping others in mind. Because I do love other people, right? Let's not love ourselves so much that we forget about everyone else and make that the excuse for why we're now hiding from the world, right? The boundaries has a shadow. It can be out of love, but it can also be out of fear. And we're seeing that today, yeah? I'm seeing that anyway. But yeah, choosing our discomfort can be saying no to something. I can say no to alcohol and booze, and that causes discomfort. But on the other side of that, there's a great reward. Right? Saying no to one thing is saying yes to another. I can say no to say no to drugs, kids, my dare shirt, or booze, or whatever vice, porn, whatever addiction, whatever crutch I can say no to, and in doing so, I also have in mind that I'm also saying yes to something else. What I'm saying yes to, I get to choose. I get to choose being my own gatekeeper, being the one who gives myself permission. Am I still good on time? Yeah. Or memory anyway. I'm about at 45 minutes, or 41. But I get to be the one within myself on the throne. King, sovereign of myself. Instead of the collective expectations, the social pressures, or the external pressures that we make okay. Because it's a big responsibility to be sovereign within ourselves. It's a lot easier to say, "Oh, the alcohol made me do it," or I was so high that I did such a thing. Really, we took such and such thing so that we could do whatever we otherwise wouldn't have done. And that goes both ways, in positive and negative, or effective and ineffective. It's a lot more rewarding when I can give myself the evidence that I'm worth loving, when I'm the one giving myself permission to do so. Yep. So creating a healthy separation from place to place, person to person, saying no to self as much as others, and not just saying no, but following it up with action. And saying no to something is also saying yes to another. Saying no to someone is also saying yes. Saying no to the wrong person is at the same time saying yes to whoever's right for you. I'm on Instagram. I am VictorY. Yeah, like, subscribe, follow, and I'll be coming out with a more in-depth version or video on collective expectations. There's a few videos I have on karma and how that's memory-based action, which is in line with expectations. That's it for now. Shorter videos coming out, longer videos coming out. And yeah, drop in the comments maybe something else that you want me to cover. Like somebody asked me to do a video on infidelity and cheating, so I followed up with that and they found it helpful. That's it for now. Peace. Love you guys.